Why hello there everyone! Not exactly long time, but perhaps intermediate time no see. As we mentioned in our community tab, we were both recently in the process of moving back home from college for the summer, which required a rather substantial portion of our attention. This, combined with the overall length of Tears of the Kingdom, sadly meant that it would take a little bit for us to cobble together some content for you folks. I suppose we could have just sprinted through the game and ignored all the shrines in the name of speed, but I fear that would have risked missing the forest for its trees, as they say. Indeed, the puzzles are the strongest draw of the Zelda series to me, hence why I come to you today with a dungeon ranking as I tend to do with these games. While they were marketed as a return to form of sorts, the fact of the matter is that they're a lot more divine beastie than they are dungeony. I have a lot of thoughts on this matter in a general sense that I'll save for another day, but for now my only concern is how they stack up against one another. It's worth noting that my list consists only of special areas that have their own maps, so while the Spirit Temple is technically a temple, it's literally just 2 rooms and an elevator shaft as far as I'm concerned. Also, this list is just going to be me running solo. Jack will be in for the boss ranking, but we decided that dungeons are more my wheelhouse, so you'll all have to wait for another video to hear his silky smooth voice again, I'm afraid. Lastly, before I kick things off, I'd like to extend my earnest thanks to our patrons, not only for their financial support, but in this case, their patience as well. We appreciate your kindness in our time of toil. That should be everything. With that out of the way, just relax and enjoy this new dose of Saito content. From the outside looking in, this looks like the coolest of all the dungeons to me. While all the others are mostly open, not particularly awe-inspiring structures, the Fire Temple boasts a scale and locale only rivaled by the Thunder Temple. If nothing else, Nintendo held to their promise of making the dungeons visually distinct instead of copy-pasting the same thing over and over. However much I'm about to rip on the Fire Temple, just know that the Divine Beasts are literally so pathetic that they are beneath my contempt, and I won't even grace them with a ranking video of their own. Anyways, the Fire Temple. Supposedly its real identity is the lost city of ancient Gorondia. If this is really the case, it would seem that the Gorons have always been dumb as rocks. The entire city makes no sense whatsoever. It was clearly designed by a booger-eating Neanderthal. It's like 3 or 4 buildings connected by minecart tracks that only allow you to progress 1 floor at a time. Imagine the god-awful commute to and from Goron City, having to climb Death Mountain, hurl yourself inside, and then hike a few hours in pitch darkness. It'd probably take around 12 hours to get there and back, which would be a disaster for work-life balance if Gorons didn't like to spend their free time jumping off of things and burning themselves alive anyways. As it so happens, the very problem you come to the Fire Temple to address is the new hobby the Gorons picked up, chowing down on marbled rock roasts. After Zelda takes a page out of Reagan's book and sends Yonobo out to sling crack in low-income Goron neighborhoods, it's your job to be the fun police and break the bad news that they have to stop smoking dope and jerking off all day. The mines do need workers, I'm afraid. As to what those workers do, however, I remain clueless. The only clear utility of any building in the Fire Temple is to move lava around and be a platform for minecarts. So let's get to the meat of things. What do I make of the roller coaster fucky fuck temple? It's a bit of a letdown, to put it nicely. The structure of the dungeon, contrary to what the unintelligible Picasso mess of a map would indicate, is almost insultingly straightforward. All you do is perform a linear tour of the facility, only stopping by to smell the bomb flowers if you find yourself in a room with a gong. These gong puzzles are only ever noteworthy for their jankiness, with Yonobo sometimes adamantly refusing to position himself atop a ramp you need him to roll on. No, he much prefers to commit suicide by leaping down off of ledges into the lava below, whereupon he will mysteriously vanish for about 15 seconds before being spawned back out of the ether. This dungeon is much like the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, a slow and plodding on-rails experience that will only amuse children. While the mansion seeks to scare you with pop-out monsters, the Fire Temple terrifies with the ghoulishly simplistic puzzles more at home in the reception lobby of a pediatrician's office. The only challenge is navigation, which coincidentally is the least fun aspect of Ultra Hand's introduction the way I see it. Oh my gosh, yes! I would love to move a bunch of minecarts around and laboriously attach rockets to them to navigate this clusterfuck of railways. While we're at it, can I drill a rusty nail into my penis and press my hand onto a scalding iron? I was on FaceTime with Jack while he did this dungeon, and we ended up laughing ourselves into hysterics over the bizarre workarounds we ended up finding to bypass the intended route through the area. Ultimately, I ought to clarify that this dungeon isn't a miserable experience. While I found it lame and worthy of ridicule, to treat it like it's as bad as Ganon's Tower from Wind Waker would be a bit harsh. I think more than anything else, it's a victim to the open-world Zelda formula, where dungeon items can't exist as they traditionally have without violating the new design philosophy. Without these unique abilities being introduced in a dungeon, their identity is diluted and their very essence becomes more forgettable. Without delving too off topic, I'll just leave it at the observation that being able to break rocks by ordering the world's most annoyingly voiced NPC to run into them is no substitute for a good hookshot. A far cry from its tear harvesting cousin. For better or for worse, this water temple is far less difficult. While there are less moments that made me want to crumple to my knees and sob, sometimes it really is the shitty things in life that make the best memories. There have been and will continue to be animated discussions amongst friends about how the water temple should be obliterated by nuclear hellfire, but I don't think anybody will ever be talking about the water temple in this game by the time the next month is through. It definitely would have done this temple good to install a wall or two is another issue. While outdoor dungeons like the Fire Sanctuary were cool in past games where your movement is heavily restricted, in the open world games it just makes an area feel way smaller and less noteworthy. You don't get that feel of like, oh shit dude, I'm entering some crazy facility, I gotta get my thinking cap on. I'll put it this way, it probably takes about 5 minutes to get from one end of Ocarina of Time's Forest Temple to the other. As for this water temple, I'd be shocked if it was more than 30 seconds from the far corner to its opposite. While the anti-gravity was fun at first, it ultimately starts to get frustrating with how much it slows down movement. As a result, I started looking for basically any way possible to solve it without the use of those mind-numbingly slow flying bubbles littered throughout. I could spend 10 hours building a ramp and finding a way to make the bubble intersect with it, but why would I do that when the cheesy recall plus ultra hand combo is out there? This is just a slow-paced dungeon, which quite literally put me to sleep at one point. You can see here I froze on the map in this footage for like a few minutes until I was jolted awake by an unknown outside stimulus. I wasn't even playing the game at 2 AM or something either. I want to say that it was like 5 PM. The place is not without its saving graces, however. For starters, Sidon fucking rules. I love that guy. He's 100% one of the most chill NPCs in any game ever created, and at that in a game that otherwise has a plot absolutely bereft of anything interesting. Like, I cannot stress this enough. Nothing other than maybe Bayonetta 3 has ever come close in terms of instilling pure cynical apathy in me. And yet, amidst that darkness is this chill-ass motherfucking shark guy. Link will be haunted to his grave knowing that his chance to become Sidon's brother-in-law is forever in shambles. Oh well. Secondly, the puzzles here are so breakable that I don't think I can even deride them as poorly designed. Like, I have absolutely no idea if I did even a single one of them the intended way, and that's kinda awesome. All in all, this feels like it would have been a mini dungeon that gave you the iron boots or some shit. If it was in any other Zelda game, it's just kinda there. After completing all 4 of the regional phenomena quests, the game formally spells out a plot point that has been blindingly obvious from the outset. The Princess Zelda, who has been attacking people, causing drug outbreaks, and summoning evil beasts, is in fact an imposter created by Ganondorf, and she hasn't just gone insane. Wow! Really? No fucking way, dude! Next you'll tell me the Joker was just hallucinating his girlfriend. Stupid reveal aside, this dungeon actually does play into the game's strengths more than the others in a lot of ways. It has no pretense of being a typical puzzle-centric dungeon, it's just a bunch of fights. And for the record, fights in this game are significantly more interesting than they tend to be in the other games in the series. There's not much to this dungeon, but there's not much to a well-cooked steak either, and I'd still take 100 of those over some stupid foo-foo shit like gluten-free bird liver pate ganache with squash garnish and bull testicles. Somebody should really tell that to the University of Maryland dining department. Honestly, the most fun thing about this temple is the path to get there. Once you've arrived, the bulk of the work is already done. Even on a blind run, it took me about half an hour. Now that I know the puzzle solutions, I could probably clear it in around 15 minutes. That said, I was a big fan of the atmosphere in this one, and the surrounding armada of flying boats is probably the most memorable visual in the game now that the dust has settled for me. I like that they explained the dungeons as actual things relevant to the respective mythos of the 4 non-Hylian peoples, instead of random giant buildings in the middle of nowhere that possess spiritual significance for no clear reason. Being a sage has drastically improved in the world of Tears of the Kingdom, though. It used to mean you had to completely abandon whatever your normal life was and spend an eternity living in a temple for no obvious purpose. I pity the poor motherfuckers in Wind Waker especially. Now you just get a rock and can astral project yourself around. Kids these days don't know how goddamn good they have it. Speaking of kids, of course Nintendo's corny ass would make your companion a kid. Why we couldn't just have Teba, I do not know. Anyways, as always, your goal is to find the 5 MacGuffins and do a thing to them to make the boss come out to play. These puzzles range from fun little platforming-esque sections like the laser drop to whatever the hell this was supposed to be. There was one puzzle that took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out because I assumed an icicle would just snap or something if I attach it to the gears. Silly me! I should have known that this would work instead of climbing all over the place looking for another gear. Definitely a fun little segment, but I can't say I was floored by even the second best dungeon the game had to offer. Once again, the desert dungeon wins the gold medal. This seems to happen an awful lot, don't it? While most of the other dungeons feel like half-baked set pieces made for the sake of fulfilling a quota, this is the lone, genuine instance where I really got that feeling of like, yeah, this is a dungeon, dude. It's still a league below any of the other games memorability-wise, but it's not bad. It's grum-grum, that's my word for stuff like this. Palatable sustenance, nothing gourmet, but it'll keep you from starving. Playing through this dungeon was like being a soldier chowing down on a hearty piece of hardtack, while the other dungeons were more akin to foraging a clean-looking rodent carcass in a vacant trench. I was debating calling all the temples by their subnames when I started production of this video, because it makes them stand out more if they're called the Stormwind Ark or whatever, instead of just defaulting to the old reliable temple name. The nail in the coffin for that was this one though, because it's the only one that doesn't seem to have an actual name other than the element it's linked to. Too bad, so sad. Anyways, the mechanics. The start is awesome. It's this frantic, super tight, close quarters Indiana Jones feeling segment, which should do well to sate any fans of the series who are hung up over the new movie reportedly being unwatchable horseshit. Unlike poor doddering Harrison Ford, who they probably had to move around with cables like a marionette, Link can safely get around with just his climbing skills, his torch, and a bit of quick thinking. Eventually you reach the main chamber, a tall vertical middle area around which the rest of the puzzles are based. It's a desert temple, so tradition dictates it must have a light reflection mechanic, which is fine by me. These are all fairly well designed, and none of them felt either too easy or too obscure to piece together, which are both fairly common in this game. Think back to all those shrines with Zonai devices you've never seen before, where they just expect you to figure that shit out with no explanation. None of that nonsense here. It's also got plenty of Gibdos roaming around, an awesome favorite enemy of mine who, besides looking cool, also drop their incredibly powerful bones whenever you blow one up. I know they break in one hit, but I was still pretty hyped when I first saw that they give a whopping 40 fuse attack. For nailing the traditional dungeon feel the best out of the offerings in this game and being set in a desert, which basically means I'm guaranteed to meet right at, let's be real, the Thunder Temple reigns as Tears of the Kingdom's finest offering to the grouchy traditionalists like myself. Thanks so much for watching, and we hope you enjoyed. Thanks for bearing with us for this little dry spell, and prepare yourselves for more content on Tears of the Kingdom as well as the Zelda series as a whole in the near future. As always, consider checking out our Discord server and Patreon, linked below, haha. That's all for now. Deuces.